Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for being here again. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Jana Pfeiffer, and I am part of the Tribal Victim Service Training and Technical Assistance Team, or TVISTA for short, at the Office for Victims of Crime. Okay, so let's get started, and we are so excited to have you with us. Human trafficking and victimizations are difficult topics to discuss. As we move through this conversation, if you need support or to talk to someone, please contact Strong Hearts Native Hotline, and their information is in the chat. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is also a resource. If you or a loved one experience or are experiencing human trafficking, all conversations are confidential and anonymous. Now I would like to welcome our moderator, Elsie Boudreau. Over to you, Elsie.
Thank you so much, Jana. Guyana. Waka, everyone. My name is Elsie Boudreau. My Yupik name is Aburin, after my maternal grandmother. I am Yupik from the village of St. Mary's, Alaska, and currently live in Anchorage. I am a training specialist with the Tribal Victim Services Training and Technical Assistance Program. And my background is in social work, and I am the youngest daughter in our traditional way of introducing ourselves. I'm the youngest daughter of the late Edgar and Teresa Francis of St. Mary's, the granddaughter of the late Alfred and Nastasia Francis of Pilot Station, and the granddaughter of George and Aburin Peterson of Old Andreevsky. I'm really happy to be here today. Our discussion today is on improving access to services for Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQIA+ survivors of human trafficking. We look forward to hearing your questions and our panelists' perspective on this topic. I'm really honored to be here and am honored to introduce our panelists. So joining me are 4 panelists. We have Lenny Hayes, Dr. Percy Lazard, Corbett Seneca, and Josie Hayano. I invite each of them to say hello and offer a brief introduction. Lenny, let's start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to identify myself in my spirit name. My name is Tunkawanahiluta, which means Redstone Ghost. My English name is Lenny Hayes, and I'm from the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Oyate of the northeast corner of South Dakota. I am also owner and operator of Tate Topa Consulting. My background is in mental and chemical health, but I'm also a very strong advocate for the Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ community across the country. I also want to say and recognize SWIC, in which I am an AC Advisory Council co-chair for the Advisory Council, Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ Advisory Council for SWIC, which is based in Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. Dr. Lazard, let's have you go next.
Why you squeezed and teaching on me. My Bureau of Indian Affairs or my Indian Act name is Percy Lazard. My name that was given to me by the matriarch is Intichin, which is wolf. Some of my responsibilities as Atmaskaluk, a person of the land, is that of a healer, a helper, a fisher, and firekeeper. I get paid to work as an assistant, most recently associate professor, with the Indigenous Studies departments here at Wilfrid Laurier. My people's homelands are Sinpington, which is village between lakes. Oh, and my sign name is Percy. And it's colonially and unceded British Columbia and extends through the invisible border to Washington State through the Colville Confederated Tribe of Indians. I bring with me almost 40 years of helping, formerly known as social work, about 25 years as a community-based researcher and clinician, and a wide variety of sectors. One of them is with sex work, trafficking, gender-based violence, houselessness, social determinants of health related to health status of HIV, young folks, deaf and hard of hearing, residential treatment programs for folks continuing to deal with ongoing colonialism, and one of those things they might do is engage in substances, or folks who hear voices we may or may not hear. So it's a wide breadth of experience and knowledge that I bring to this conversation, as well as lived experience of someone who's had multiple family members, biological chosen and extended, who were reported missing and or later found murdered and formerly trafficked. So that's the experience and what I bring to the conversation. Limlam.
Diana, so much, Dr. Lizard. We're so happy that you're with us today and honored that you can share your experiences. So I would like to welcome Corbett. Corbett, on to you.
Esqueno, I'm thankful you all are well. My name is Corbett Seneca, and I reside in upstate New York over by Niagara Falls and Buffalo. I'm a member of the Wolf Clan and of the Seneca Nation. We refer to ourselves as Anondowaga, which is people of the hill. I bring with me a lifetime of experience. I meet with people and I tell them I have a PhD in life because it's everything that I discuss and I talk about, I only have my life experience to discuss and bring. So that's what I'm really excited and happy of my own journey and proud of myself because I am able to share and hopefully inspire and lead people and just shine light in dark places and just help as much as possible because I truly have become the person I needed growing up. And there's no blueprint to this. There's really no set way to do it. And I'm just glad that I can share what worked for me to hopefully help others to find their way as well and help others with helping others find their way. So Yahweh, thank you.
Diana, Corbett, thank you for sharing your light with us. Now I'll turn to Josie. Josie, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Elsie. My name is Josie Hayano. I am the oldest daughter of Nina Hayano of Tanana and David Hayano of Ecock, Alaska. I am Degaton Athabaskan. I'm also the granddaughter of Alfred Miller of Anvik, Alaska, and the late Paul and Mary Starr of Tanana, Alaska, and the late Pete and Rosa Hayano of Ecock, Alaska. I bring to this conversation a few different things. One, I am Alaska Native. I am, I guess by the technical term, a social worker, also a licensed social worker. So I'm very proud to serve my community, to view myself as a helper and a learner in the spaces that I work here. I'm also the founder of Signify Consulting, where I do a lot of training in my community and across the nation on human trafficking, really specifically how that's impacted our community here in Alaska. I'm also proud to share that although my viewpoints today are not a reflection of the council, I am the first Alaskan to serve on the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, which is a presidential appointment, and I'm able to use this role to help inform the federal government on how to better shape anti-trafficking work in our communities. Other than that, I'm a fisherman, I'm a subpar berry picker, and I'm a daughter, an auntie, a niece, and a sister. I'm happy to be here.
Diana, so much, Josie. So we're really honored to have each of you here to share your knowledge and your experiences. I just want to take a moment. We always want to start in a good way. And we're thinking of Beverly, and she's doing some work right now with an elder. So I'm wanting to just invite that energy, and we can just all take a moment just to remember who we are, where we come from, our ancestors, the land upon which we sit, and know that we come here with good hearts, with good intentions to learn from each other and support each other as we go through creating spaces for people that we serve and love. So to start our discussion, I'd like to ask our panelists a few of my own questions. Following these opening questions, we will shift to your questions. Again, please enter your questions at any time through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So Lenny, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the circumstances putting Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQIA+ relatives at greater risk of experiencing human trafficking?
Thank you, Elsie, for that question. First of all, before we get started, I had seen that there was already a question about what does Two-Spirit mean. So the term Two-Spirit came about in 1990 by a group of elders who came together to basically sort of step away from that mainstream language of LGBTQ. The way that I was taught and the way that I see it, it's that reconnection to culture and spirituality. And so when we talk about the term Two-Spirit, it means that the individual who identifies as Native LGBTQ houses both a male and female spirit. But one of the things that I always like to remind people with that term Two-Spirit, that it's a fairly new word that came about in 1990. There are a lot of tribal communities across the country who do not connect with that term Two-Spirit. And so basically what I'm in the work that I do, I'm always reminding people that it's important for us that we show respect, and just because you may come across a Native person who may identify, don't assume that they call themselves Two-Spirit. What we should be doing is just simply asking them, how do you identify? Because again, it's a word that's used across the country. And again, we just have to be respectful because there is people and there is tribal communities that don't recognize the word Two-Spirit. So again, I just wanted to just begin with that. But one of the things that we have to understand is that before colonization, our tribes across the country specifically had a word that recognized individuals who we recognize today as Native LGBTQ. So they had a specific word that they used. One of the things that I talk about is that in our tribal languages, we don't have a specific word that identifies gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. There was a specific word that they used to identify these individuals. And so when I go out across Indian country and I present and talk about Two-Spirit identity, that's one of the things that I always like to ask the audience. Do you know the word in your language that would identify someone like me? So for me, I identify as a Winkta, which is the word that was given to me by my people. And then second, I identify as a Two-Spirit. And then lastly, I identify as a gay male. I do that in order to help me to decolonize my way of thinking and take back the word that was given to me by my people. And so it's really important for us to understand how colonization has really impacted not only our Native community, but the specific population of Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ people. So before colonization and when colonization happened, what happened was the missionaries and the Europeans came in, and because we didn't line up in their way of thinking as male and female, right? A lot of the tribal communities that history tells us had same-sex couples, and they had individuals who did specific roles in their tribal communities. What they did was, because we didn't line up to their idea or their thoughts, they started murdering individuals who identified as Two-Spirit or Native LGBTQ+. And so our tribal communities, actually what they did, because they honored and respected us before colonization, we were considered sacred, we were considered holy. And so what they did basically was took us underground to hide us because of what was happening to us. But what I talk about is that they also forgot about us. And what I mean by that is that today, a lot of our Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ people who live in tribal communities or rural communities have often been shunned, or often shunned by community, shunned by family members. And so a lot of them have left the reservation to go to like the bigger cities, the urban communities, to seek resources to help them. But what I always say too is that these urban and suburban areas often don't know how to help individuals who identify, because they don't understand that whole concept of Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ identity. They don't know like what happened to us. And we still struggle a lot, even as Native people, Indigenous people, in trying to educate and bring awareness about our identities. And so because of that, there's such a huge impact. And what I say is that individuals who can't help us, who don't understand us, don't know specifically like what has happened to us. So I'm always saying that we are often a forgotten and underserved population in many, many different ways. I mean, and we'll get into more of that in our conversation, but just specifically talking about data about us and all the violence that's put upon this population. And so for me as an advocate and as someone who does a lot of violence prevention work, it's important for me to educate and bring awareness to anybody who wants to listen. But again, to really just remind people not to forget about this population. There's so much that we can talk about, but we don't have a lot of time. But I specifically just wanted to bring some education and awareness about the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. My next question is for Josie. What are barriers Two-Spirit relatives and Native LGBTQIA+ encounter when accessing services?
Thank you, Elsie. And thank you, Lenny. I always really enjoy listening to your words and your education. I want to start my response a little bit broad. I'm a macro social worker at heart, so I like to think about these societies and systems that we work within and reframe language a little bit. I think, I feel this kind of tightness in my throat when I start talking about barriers and vulnerabilities, these words, barriers and vulnerabilities, because it feels like within that is something I have to own, or something that is at fault of me because of my existence, or at fault of our Alaska Native youth because they are Alaska Native, because they identify as Two-Spirit or LGBTQ, that there are these vulnerabilities and barriers because of their identity. And I want to shift and reframe that for a second. One of the largest barriers that I truly see in our community is just lack of knowledge, lack of education about this very directed and intentional and methodic ways that human trafficking can occur. When I started out in this field as a service provider, and this is where the tightness in my throat comes because this is uncomfortable to talk about, but I think we have to. One of the very first trainings that I got, working in a shelter service that served mostly Alaska Native youth and attempting to do anti-trafficking work, the first training I got was from law enforcement, and they told us that they had learned from interrogating pimps, often that were affiliated with gangs, that these groups and gangs had come to Alaska from the lower 48 with the intention to traffic Native people. And they had actually termed their activity tundra pimping, which is, I still have a hard time even saying that, but it's real and it's a reality. And they had shared with law enforcement that they were intentionally targeting Alaska Native people of all genders, all sexualities, because they could be marketed as other races. And I really want to emphasize this because Dr. Lazard, in a conversation we had earlier, we talked about this monetization of culture, of people, of our society. And I think we need to talk about human trafficking as $150 billion a year global industry. And the demand is focused on identity, on gender, on sexuality, on people's identities is marketed. And I think we have to talk about that in our communities and and especially with our young people, to educate. I think talking about this puts the emphasis on the very real threats that are existing, sometimes right outside the doors of our service providers. This lack of education and awareness about this, I remember hearing that for the first time and thinking, I'm a 30-something-year-old woman who has lived experience in trafficking, who had access to healthcare, education, who had access to a strong matriarchal family unit. And this is the first time I'm hearing that that's a threat that exists in my community. I describe it to folks sometimes that working in the field, working with youth experiencing homelessness, working with Alaska Native youth experiencing homelessness, I felt this heavy sense of failure when they would come in and explain to me a situation, after trust is built, that was very clearly trafficking. And it felt like listening to someone tell me that their house had burned down, but they didn't know what fire was, and they didn't have the language to explain to me about that fire. And they didn't know that there were things that could have helped protect them along the way, or that they were deserving of help, or that they could have called or reached out. I feel like this heavy sense of disservice, especially to our young people, that we're not doing more to educate on this threat. And I think that is a barrier to services. How do you ask for the services you need when you have no idea what's happening? I think that isolation comes with a lot of shame, comes with a lot of feeling of otherness, having to disconnect from your community because your experience is not something you're familiar with. It's not something the matriarchs or the elders in your community talk to you about. My next point, and I'll get a little bit more specific to services here, is, and I can only speak through my lens as a provider in Alaska, but we have a long way to go to bridge just being accepting of other identities to actually being celebratory of that and creating intentional spaces for people. I think we have to make sure that our messaging is consistent. For example, if a community member comes into your building, comes into your healthcare, whether that's healthcare, whether that's shelter, whether that's food, and they come in because there's a pride flag hanging in the window, what are they going to find when they come in? Will they find gender fluid bathrooms? Will there be rooms available for a trans identifying person? Will the forms that you ask them allow them to use the name and the pronouns that they have chosen that identify themselves? And when they look around, are they going to see other people like them, not just in services and not just in case management, but in leadership? On the topic of forms, I want to note really quick, Dr. Percy Lazard, in an earlier conversation we had, brought up a great point about this barrier to service being the amount of forms and the westernization of our processes. And I've felt that so heavy over the years when I have sitting in front of me as a clinician, as a social worker, I want to meet with this person in front of me who's an Alaska Native youth from a rural community. And the first thing I have to ask them is to fill out this pile of paperwork where I ask them for a lot of government information about themselves. And that's a really hard way to start to be in community with someone and start to build trust. And I think we feel that as service providers, that it doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel good, but it's part of our roles. So I would say that a barrier to services is not having a way to communicate with each other the way that we're supposed to, and to provide services in the way that we're supposed to. Kind of lastly here, I want to share in my trainings, I talk a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. But I think that when we talk about services and how we provide them to the community, we get real stuck on this bottom layer, on food, shelter, deodorant, a sack lunch, those types of things. And we forget to include other levels in this conversation. And I think those are the levels that I see most frequently being exploited by human traffickers. So if we were to look at those other levels and consider, I would ask you to consider in your agencies and your services, where in your community can Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQIA plus people access not only their basic needs, but safety and security. Do your housing programs that you're offering also allow for communal and intergenerational living? Is the landlord that you're referring them to with that housing voucher a safe person? Are there also places of employment where they can reach their financial goals, or places of education and learning where they can reach their educational goals? What about love and belonging? None of us are thriving with just a roof over our head. Where are these community members able to access friendship and intimacy and connection? And what about self-esteem and self-actualization? I think in order to be able to truly say that we provide services, that we provide access to all of our community members, and especially our Two-Spirit and LGBTQ community members, we have to be able to see that they have opportunity and in spaces for joy and to recognize or to realize inner potential. And I think, we had a conversation, this group yesterday that really sat in my heart. And I want to share that. I know I said lastly already, but lastly, one more time. I think a huge barrier in our community is all of the ways in which we are struggling with our identities and acceptance of those identities. The youth that I've worked with over the years who identify as Alaska Native and identify as part of the LGBTQ community are sometimes struggling with the Native identity a little bit more, or maybe that's the one that they don't have the answers for. And I think that we're living in societies where we're told that we should celebrate this Native identity, but the racism and prejudice within our communities still exists. And that can be a really difficult thing. We also serve a lot of community members that maybe because of the use of blood quantum and different government tools of measuring our nativeness don't feel like we belong in Native spaces. How do we then access Native ways to healing and Native ways to community? I think that's a heavy thing and it's hard, but I think in order to decrease that barrier to services, we need to create safe spaces for people to not only explore their gender and sexuality, but explore what that means in the context of being Native and the context of being Indigenous. Thank you, Elsie. I'm going to hand that back over to you.
Thank you so much, Josie. There's so much there. I could pick at so much of what you shared. I'm still stuck on tundra pimping. I'd never heard that term, being from Alaska, and I loved your analogy of the house burning down and not having the words to describe what's happening. So incredible. Like that could be translated into so many different aspects of what it means to be a human being or spirit burning down, so thank you so much for that. And I just want to remind people that you can submit your questions for the panelists in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will go to those shortly. And my next question is for Corbett. How can a community create a circle of support for Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQIA+ relatives? Corbett?
Thank you. I think the most important thing to remember is that humans are, how do I want to word this? So, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but then we always end up judging that book by its cover. So when I say that we're visual people, and we go off of how things look. And I think when we enter a space or when we are sending emails with each other, it's a lot of how do we show that we're allies, or we are supportive, or we're actually here, we're safe people. And I only have myself as an example because growing up, a lot of my own personal situations was if I wanted to do something, so I applaud my mom for this lesson, was if I want to do something, I need to learn to do things by myself because I may end up missing out. So then I started to travel and I started to go into different areas, and I would be just a solo traveler, I would find ways I would sleep in my car and just to experience new places. And so I would go into restaurants and I would find different businesses and stuff that I knew would be safe. And how I knew that was because they had visualizations. Josie touched on this, on whether it was a pride flag. And I know that there's a new symbol, and I was trying to remind myself to look for it yesterday, but our lives are so busy, so I didn't get a chance to look for this new symbol. But it said safe place, because a lot of businesses or a lot of government, it's being frowned upon to promote the pride flag outside of Pride Month now. So they came up with this new symbolization, and it says safe place. So those are areas that I look at when I'm out traveling. And then even your email signatures, or when you go to conferences, a lot of places are asking what are your pronouns. And I have conversations because I feel like being on the East Coast, or a tribe on the East Coast, we're lacking in the education, because I only compare when I'm out on the Western nations and tribes. They're so far ahead when it comes to the education of to us LGBTQ plus community. And I see everybody utilizing pronouns, and everybody's just themselves and happy and free. And I see that, and I love that. I love being out there in those other nations and communities. So when I come back to my own, we're not there yet. I'm proud to say that we're starting to make those, take those steps to start showing the pride flag. And I use my pronouns in my email signature, and I had people ask, what is that? What does that mean? And why is it important? And I just tell everybody, I said, that's a visualization that especially if you're in a position where you're providing services for somebody, and they might identify but not publicly, they are not going to be as forthcoming, because they might not feel as safe with you right up front. So it's the small things that matter. TNT, tiny noticeable things. Remember that, TNT. And that's one thing that will show them that you understand, you listen, and you get it. And then I say listen because that's the most important thing you can do as well to help create that supportive circle in your community, is that anytime you're planning something, whether it comes over a certain community or a group of people, you have to make sure that those people are at your table when you're planning, because those are your experts. And that's the most important thing to remember. You can have any certification or degree hanging on your wall or in your office, but that doesn't make you an expert in this field. When you're working with somebody, you have to remember that they know what they need to succeed. They know what it's going to take for them to get from point A to point B. And as us here, supportive service people, we have to remember to humble ourselves and say, I am here as somebody to walk with you, beside you, and support you, and help you get through those barriers, because that's the biggest thing that we as people of the 2S LGBTQ plus community face, is that we don't know how to get over these barriers. So creating that, that circle of support, the most important thing I really have to emphasize is listen and show and be honest. If you don't know, say you don't know. You cannot fake it till you make it. It's the best thing you can do is just ask, what does this mean? Because I can almost guarantee, or I would love to be able to guarantee, that I would rather tell you or explain to you. That way, to me, that's letting me know that you're willing to learn. And then once you make that, you break that barrier down with that person they're working with, it just opens up a whole floodgate of positive engagement with them, and it could lead to so much more success rates when it comes to any kind of services like this. I don't want to take up too much time because I know we have a lot, so I'll end it there. Thank you. Nelly.
Thank you so much, Corbett. I just remember your introduction saying you have a PhD in life, and just listening to you talking about those tiny noticeable things really go a long way in terms of creating a circle of support for all people, and really having the heart to listen and show and to be honest, right? So thank you so much. My last question is for Dr. Lazard. Again, a reminder for you to type your questions for our panelists into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So Dr. Lazard, who are partners to engage with when doing work for Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQIA+ community?
So what experience I have is not the only answer. It's not going to quick fix the situation you find yourself in, whether you're agency leader, discipline specific director, or chair of a board of governance. There needs to be multiple interventions, and I think my colleagues and community members here have alluded to that. But I literally want to create an opportunity for folks to, because I've been multitasking and looking at some of the questions. The labor should not be solely on 2S LGBTQIA folks. Folks need to non-Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, Afro-Indigenous, Black Indigenous folks, like cisgendered heterosexual folks need to do some heavy lifting. One thing you need to ask yourself, what are you doing when nobody's looking? Right? What are you doing when your colleague is not there in the room, when there are decisions being made at regional, provincial, territorial, state conversations, conferences, gatherings? What are you doing? How are you interjecting? And when there are microaggressions and microassaults happening against a particular community, in this case, Indigenous folks with intersecting identities. Do you even know what intersectionality means? Beyond there's a Native person, I think I know how we can best support Native folks, but they happen to be queer. They happen to be experiencing gender-based violence. They're also houseless, and they're coping with I don't think very nice coping mechanisms, right? Which is your value being attached to to potentially intersecting identities of communities that I have multiple membership in, right? So there's something that you can read, folks, for the questions that happen. That's a starting point. To be critically reflexive, to know that it's messy, and to know that in terms of, we've been very clear here, meeting us where we're at, meeting the community where they're at, listening beyond just hearing what we're saying, actively listening and seeing the person in front of you, which to me are elements of harm reduction. And harm reduction, I know gets us really, right? It's this kit, but it's also ways in which you and your sector and your position and your policies that you have to implement have the capacity to improve the lives of this community that we're talking about, or be a barrier, or cause continual harms, or further have us be targeted, right? Or to take our voices away, to silence, right? Which has happened. And we've been able to articulate that it continues to happen. And that's another layer of colonialism, right? So who can we partner with? First, self-reflection, critical reflection. Why me, why now? Right? I'm not in myself, I'm not interested in allies, because allies is, I did a good thing. When accomplices and co-conspirators they take the time to build the relationships with communities. They engage in a basic tenet of Indigenous peoples across Indian country, whether it's north or south of the border, in the cities, outside the cities, rural settings, is who are you? Relationality. Right? I always share with folks that if you've done a consistency of behavior over an extended period of time, you might get an invite, right? But the invite shouldn't be into our spaces to say, but I did good, and do a selfie and put it on your social media, when the issues of disappearance, targeted violence, resource extraction of our young people and our 2S LGBTQIA folks is happening, then what are you doing? Right? It's just smoke and mirrors. So there's a lot of things that are happening north of the south of the border of agencies that are providing affirming and culturally safe, brave spaces. There's a lot of things that are safe, right? Is it safe to be here? Probably not, because I'm sure people are experiencing fragility. Oh my gosh, you don't want me to say I'm a good person? I'm not interested in benevolence, because benevolence, if we get stuck there with me having to deal with you and the labor, my people are dying. My people are not being housed. My people are not having access to testing to know their status for STIs, BBIs, or getting access to food, or access to their children, or access to shelter, right? I can't get stuck there, and I can't be bothered with that, of convincing you that you're a good person. You should just be doing the work as directed by this circle of folks and the people who came before us. This tune has not changed. I don't know how many different ways Indigenous people with intersecting identities can say, listen to us, take direction from us. Nothing sustainable without us, right? And one piece of intervention around gender-based violence, and I just put it in the chat, that literally piece of work was for us, by us, meaning it was the conversation with people who have experienced sex work or trafficked gender-based violence, who were from our relatives from the north, meaning Inuit folks, Alaska, like really far north, trans folks, because I don't want to conflate Two-Spirit with gender diversity. They're totally two different experiences, right? And young folks, right? So I just want to share that piece of, this is a starting point, reflection, this document, search for research done by the community. In the context here, Bay Area, Bates, which is in San Francisco. My context right now is Canadian, but find the equivalent in this state or the territory you're at. There are many places here in North America. Native Youth Sexual Health Network, which does not recognize a colonial border, which is very anti-colonial. And centering the voices of Two-Spirit leadership as a now instead of a future. When people say youth are our leaders, well, no, they situate Native Youth Sexual Health Network as they are the leaders now to reimagine that this future is possible. So there's I want to get to the questions. I gave you about 7 interventions, and we've given you collectively at least 25. So if you're actively listening, take one of the things that each one of us has said and make that your part of your strategic plan. Make that part of your work plan. Make that part of your specific outreach. And when you're wanting to work with community. So yeah. So those are some very specific ways in which you can raise up and elevate and center in an affirming way to us LGBTQIA folks who experience gender-based violence and the wide variety of issues that we've been able to present today.
Thank you, Dr. Lazard. I see Josie saying she wants to jump up and shout when you talk, and I feel the same way. There's so many layers to what you've shared, and what I want to highlight is the heavy lifting and who's doing the heavy lifting and whose responsibility is it to do that heavy lifting, and how we all need to really do a lot of self-reflection and first and foremost be in relationship. I love that. So I'm just in awe with the panelists and all of what you're sharing. We do have a question for Lenny. I'm going to shift a little bit to the audience's questions. But before I do that, I just want to thank our panelists for being able to speak and put words to this, to your experiences, and to share all of what you've shared. So Lenny, can you share 1 or 2 things organizations can do to be more inclusive of Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ individuals in providing services?
Oh, that's such a big question, but one of the things too, I mean, as a barrier that I really want to acknowledge, and I think it's important that we say this, or I say this, is that it's really important for our tribal communities to step outside of that colonized way of thinking and to understand, again, before colonization, we were looked upon as sacred beings. We were highly respected. We were loved by our people, but we also need to understand what the church did to us, right? And so a lot of our relatives who identify as Two-Spirit or Native LGBTQ people are shunned by our own people. And again, we were talking a little bit about that yesterday in preparing for this webinar today, you know, that disconnection. And a lot of our young people are suffering because of the fact that they don't know who they are, but they're also disconnected from that cultural belief of who they are as an Indigenous or Native person. And personally, in all the work that I've done as a mental and chemical health provider, and going into communities and sitting with people who identify of how hurt they are because they're not a part of ceremony, and how they're told often you're going to go to hell, you know, bringing in that colonized way of thinking of the church. And so many of them are just lost. And so I'm always saying it's a responsibility of our tribal communities too, to also to change their way of thinking, because our tribal communities are also not providing the proper services for individuals who identify, like our elders, when it comes to our community members who have HIV, who are living with HIV, all the ones who are struggling with mental health issues, addiction issues, all of those things. One of the things that I often will say to organizations, especially coming from a perspective of mental health, it's not our responsibility to be teaching non-Native therapists about Native identity. And so I've heard a lot of Native people that I've worked with who have often said, I don't like going to a non-Native therapist because I feel like I have to educate them about my identity rather than to focus on the issues that brought them to a therapeutic setting, right? The other piece too, when we talk about human trafficking, one of the things that I've said and advocated about so much in the work that I've been doing in regards to trafficking is that we need to step away, that it's not just a one gender issue. It's an issue that's impacting all our genders, our females, our males, our Two-Spirit community, right? And so in order for us to heal as people and as Native people, is that we need to heal as a community and not focus on just a one gender issue, but create spaces for our males, our females, our Two-Spirit people, our Native LGBTQ plus people. That's how we're going to heal as a community. Because if we just focus on one gender, that's not going to heal the circle, right? And so some of us in our Indigenous communities are really connected to that understanding of the circle. The other piece too, I think is, you know, really important, is how important it is for us to help our elders and to go to our elders and get a lot of, our Two-Spirit elders have a lot of knowledge. I respect a lot of our elders in our community here in the States. Like for instance, my relative Beverly Little Thunder, who I have learned so much from, and for her being there in 1990 when the term Two-Spirit came about. The other one is the late Marlon Fixico, who was a great support in all of the work that I've been doing to help, you know, in regards to violence prevention, and understanding that a lot of our Native men and boys are suffering and they're silenced because of all of the things that have happened to them. And the realization that when we talk about sexual violence or trafficking, it's not just our community that's being impacted, it's all, you know, straight men, straight boys, straight girls, straight women, our Two-Spirit women and men, our transgender community, they're all being impacted by these issues. But again, we live in a world of labels. And so we're always labeling individuals. And for us as a community, we also need to really connect with Indigenous people who are doing the work. So I want to do a shout out to my friend, Jesse Leon, and his book. If you have not read anything about male trafficking, there's a book called I'm Not Broken by Jesse Leon. If you want to learn more about male trafficking. The other fact is that there is statistics that show that 51% of our gay boys in the country are being trafficked, which surpasses girls. We don't talk about those things, and we need to start talking about this as a human issue, not a gender issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. I want to welcome Beverly Little Thunder to be as a panelist, and appreciate your words in the chat that, to mention the elder Two-Spirit people. And I'm wondering if you would like to share some words.
Yes, I would. Thank you for allowing me to come on so late. I've been here since the beginning. I just didn't know how to access video or audio, but I heard everything that was said. I think that in the elder community of Two-Spirit people, technological communication is new. And I'm one of those people who is just getting up to speed on it. I've gotten beyond just plugging in my computer. But, I think it's important that we realize that it's our younger generation that is making a lot of the changes. And it really, really has always upset me that so many of my community, the younger generation, have been subjected to human trafficking just to survive, just to find food, just to find shelter, just to find a place to be. And, at 76, I don't have a lot of years left on this side. And so it's really important, I think, that as elders, we stop ascribing ourselves to the colonial ideology that has been drummed into our heads. I meet a lot of elders, both straight and Two-Spirit, who really still hang on to some of those judgmental ideologies. And for me, I think that judgment is one of our worst enemies. And someone asked me a couple of days ago, what would your vision be for 25 years from now? And it would be that none of my Indigenous Two-Spirit siblings are judged for who they are, that they are honored for being good human beings. And as an elder in this community, who's worked in this community for the last 45 years, I hope that I am able to put forth a model that they can look towards, that they have hope of being one day, of being even better than I could ever be. And the spiritual life of my Lakota people is what has kept me alive. And many times that I have thought about suicide, and many times I just thought I would do the world a favor and leave. It has been those traditions that have held me here. And I was once rejected 40 years ago from our ceremonies. In the last 7 years, I have been invited back to my reservation, something I never would have thought of. So change is happening, but I think that within our Indigenous communities, more change needs to happen. I think more support needs to come from our tribes, from our straight siblings, and especially from our elders. We have to get rid of this idea that Christianity is the end all, because it is not. That's all that I have to offer right at this moment. But thank you for finally guiding me through getting to this point. Lamia.
Diana, so much. Beverly Little Thunder, it's such an honor to meet you. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. There's just so much I would love to say. I know we have beautiful questions in the chat, and I apologize that we're not able to get to all the questions, and know that all of this is recorded, and you'll be sent this information. So I'm wanting to spend our last time together hearing from all our panelists with your incredible wisdom. So I'm wondering if each of you would share something that you would like participants to take away from this conversation. And I'm going to start with Corbett.
The takeaway that I want everybody to go away from this conversation is, I want you all to be comfortable with not knowing everything. Everybody lets our egos get in the way that we work in this field, so we have to know everything. And I want you to know to be gentle with yourself. It's a day-to-day experience when you're working with others. You don't know how they're going to be, you don't know how you're going to be. So the biggest takeaway is just, it's okay to not know, it's okay to not understand. And I refer back to that being honest. You have to be honest with what you don't know, what you do know. And I just want to kind of segue a little bit and just, make sure everybody does take that time for themselves, because that's the most important thing. I share that, time is the most expensive thing that we have to offer people. So when you're doing something for yourself, that is self-care, that's self-love. So always make sure you take care of yourself and thank yourself for whatever part of your journey or experience that your life has led you through, because there's been so many times where we find ourselves in positions that sometimes we don't feel like we're gonna, how are we gonna make it out of this? And you did. So I want you to really, again, looping it back to just being honest with yourself and care for yourself first and foremost. You can't pour from empty cups.
Thank you so much, Corbett. And I'll forever remember the light that you share. I'm happy to know that your light is out there. And I love that time is the most expensive thing we have to offer people. And in that time, you're creating space for people to be heard. Beautiful. So next I will go to Josie. So again, if you would share something that you would like participants to take away from this conversation.
Perhaps there's been so much good conversation. I think my one biggest thing I would ask you to take away from this conversation is to pay attention to everything happening in your societies. Pay attention to the ways that society as a whole is impacting your communities, because those are the issues that are impacting the populations that you serve. I want to do just 5 seconds to say, pay attention to the current fentanyl crisis in our communities. It is hurting people, and we are losing people faster than ever. And we are seeing so much trafficking, so much forced labor. So pay attention. these things impact all of us together, whether you're in Alaska, whether you're in Canada, whether you're across the world, we are in the same village together.
Thank you, Josie. All right, I will go to Lenny. Lenny, same question.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I just want to remind people that who we identify is just part of our identity. We are human beings. And the reality of it is just that true understanding of what colonization did to us. Because what I always say is that Creator doesn't make mistakes. We're not mistakes. It was what was done to us. And the other thing too, I mean, and to realize that we are a beautiful community. I know so many people in our community who are doing beautiful work. I mean, you know, I was glad that Bates was referenced here. I'm going to be going to that in February, which I'm so excited. I've been to the Bates powwow before, which is held in San Francisco, but also that understanding that we have societies all over the country. Specifically, you know, one of them that I've been to several times is the Montana Two-Spirit Gathering, which brings a lot of our Two-Spirit people together to be a part of ceremony, to have conversation, to support one another. And we just ask our allies, our tribal communities, our parents, our families, our communities to just believe in us, to love us, to accept us, and really, you know, and to really just truly understand that impact of colonization. And again, to look at us as human beings and not just our identity and how we identify. And to remember that before colonization, we were looked upon as spiritual beings, but today we're looked upon as sexual beings. Thank you.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Lenny. I love that we're more than our identities and that we are not mistakes. That's incredible. All right, Dr. Lazard, I'll turn it over to you with the same question.
Multiple interventions, folks, multiple feelings, but not on the labor of 2S LGBTQI folks or people who support 2S LGBTQI folks as Indigenous, because we're working hard with very little pay in multiple positions, trying to keep our communities alive or have some semblance of dignity in this society and world that feels that all we are is culture, singing, dancing, and feathers, when there's just so much more to who we are. And you won't always get to know what that is. It's none of your business. Right? We get to have that and experience that with each other. I gave a lot of recommendations, but I think it's messy. You're not going to find the answers here. I think the 90s was the worst thing that happened to education and workshops. If you went to a panel, a webinar, a workshop, that you became experts or knew how to best support that community. I think that this time here should tell you that you should make this a lifelong commitment, right? A lifelong commitment to do heavy lifting, to be critically reflective, to move beyond fragility, whether it's because you're cisgendered, heterosexual, or a settler, or white, right? And when you're called in, or when people take the labor to say, you know what, that was microaggressive, or that wasn't cool, or that was highly inappropriate, then actually is that person experiencing that for 1,000 times that day and taking that one moment to say, you know what, I think Josie can do better. I have this relationship with Josie. Then just take that as a gift, folks, that you're having someone remind you of how to be a doggone good relative and not cause harm. Be part of the harm. I know people are probably going, oh my goodness, harm. How can it be harmful? I'm doing good. No, that's benevolence. That's thinking I'm not that bad, heterosexual, cisgendered, straight person. Well, in this case, you are. And if that's the worst thing somebody can say, you're anti-Indigenous racist, you're homophobic, you're transphobic. And look at, you still have jobs. The sky didn't fall. Find like-minded people, unpack how you feel, what the impact and how to repair relationships. Because Indigenous people have generously, especially with intersecting identities, that includes a 2S LGBTQIA identity, been giving direction on how best to meet us where we're at, how best to make us shine, and how best to have us truly experience 2S LGBTQIA joy. Yeah, so I think that is enough. Extended behavior over an extended period of time, critically reflexive, unpack with other folks, not the community. Don't come to us just to learn about culture, because as we've shared, we're in different entry points because of colonialism, where you folks get access to our knowledge keepers and our ceremonies, even before us. Okay, so don't go, oh, I want to learn about culture. Well, so do we. And we're more than just culture. We are holistic beings, right? So yeah, so I'd like to believe that you folks already came here, and you showing up demonstrates behaviorally that you are committed to helping these communities experience 2S LGBTQIA joy and minimize the effects of ongoing colonialism. So that in itself is an entry point. So continue this lifelong learning, continue this commitment to unpacking what you think you know about Indigenous people, Indigenous experiences under colonial conditions that we still have to deal with. Right? And step back. That article, those articles I shared with you are very directive on things that you could do behaviorally when nobody's looking, and that's sustainable to reduce the ways in which Indigenous 2S LGBTQIA folks get to live a good life. Yeah. So it's an answer. There needs to be multiple. You've been given direction. Actively be a verb and be an active listener and actualize those things, relatives. Because lives depend on it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Lives depend on you being a verb. Just think about that. That's, wow. So much. I'm just like in awe of our discussion today, and I wish we could just continue and continue. There's just so much learning. I want to give Beverly Little Thunder an opportunity to share one thing that you would like participants to take away from this conversation.
Well, in listening to this incredible panel of younger people, they have said everything that I probably would have said. So a takeaway is to open your ears and your hearts to hear what has been said. I also echo what Lenny has said. We are human beings. Yes, we were considered sacred people in our communities. We were highly respected. That's not always the case anymore. So there is a lot of work yet to be done. And I would like you to take away that knowledge that you can help. You've been given all the information to start you on this understanding. We are all lifelong learners. We are always learning something new. I always say I don't want to stop learning, because when I stop learning, it means that you're going to be at my funeral. So remember that not every Two-Spirit person you encounter is going to have the same experience. They are not going to see themselves as a sacred being or as someone worthy of respect. There are just so many layers in our community. I don't think that any of us on this panel have come to this place overnight. We weren't born with this knowledge. It took us our lives to learn this and to unpack our own insecurities, our own colonization, and we are still doing that. And to remember that everything we do in this society today is a result of colonization. And that we need to start unraveling that and dismantling that from our mindset. And it may not be something that we will all see in the very immediate future. But I've always been taught to pray for those 7 generations to come. And I'm really honored because each person who is on this call is a part of the 7 generations I have been praying for most of my life. Pelamia for being here, Pelamia for hearing what has been said. Without the accent.
Guyana, so much. The people on the panel are answers to prayers, truly, and I appreciate all of you so much. I want to thank Lenny for all your work that you do, but mostly just for you. Thank you for being you. Dr. Lizard, your incredible knowledge, intellect, the articulation, huge understanding of issues beyond words. And you're a gift to our world, to our communities. Josie, you are so articulate, beautiful understanding, bringing your experiences to our table in a way that solidifies me as a Yupik person. You make me proud as a Yupik person to know that there's another Alaska Native person that's doing this work. Corbett, I just take light. You're light. You bring light to the world, and I appreciate I acknowledge all of what you had to go through. I don't know all of what you had to go through to have the PhD in life, but thank you for embracing your light and sharing it with the world. So, and Beverly Little Thunder, oh my gosh, I just send you hugs. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here today. Take care.